The dust swirled around Zelda Dawson's worn boots as she stood at the gate of the ranch, one hand gripping a battered leather suitcase so tightly her knuckles had gone white, the other shielding her eyes from the late afternoon sun that bore down on Globe, Arizona, with relentless intensity in the summer of 1883. Ethan Foster had been mending the fence line when he spotted her, a silhouette against the shimmering heat, and for a moment his heart stopped because she looked so much like the ghost of his past standing there, the woman his partner Thomas had loved more than life itself. The hammer slipped from his fingers and hit the hard, packed earth with a dull thud as recognition flooded through him, followed immediately by the sharp sting of grief that never quite left him, not since the day 3 months ago when Thomas had taken a bullet meant for Ethan during a cattle rustling gone violent. Ethan walked toward the gate slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last, his mind racing with questions he wasn't sure he wanted answered. Zelda stood perfectly still, watching him approach, her green eyes rimmed with exhaustion and something else he couldn't quite name. She was 24 years old, he knew, 2 years younger than himself, though the weight of recent tragedy had etched lines around her eyes that made her seem older, more weathered than when Thomas had proudly introduced them at their wedding 2 years prior. "Zelda," he said when he reached the gate, his voice rough from disuse and emotion. He spent most days alone on this ranch now, talking only to the horses and the occasional ranch hand who drifted through looking for work. "Ethan," she replied, and her voice cracked on his name. "I didn't know where else to go." He looked at her standing there in the dust, at the single suitcase that held whatever remained of her life, at the determination mixed with desperation in her eyes, and he heard Thomas's voice in his head as clear as if his partner stood beside him. "Take care of her if anything happens to me," Thomas had said one night around the campfire, half joking but with that serious undercurrent that meant he truly meant it. "Promise me." And Ethan had promised, never thinking he would have to make good on those words. "He would want you here," Ethan said, reaching for the gate latch. The metal was hot against his palm as he pulled it open. "Come on in." Relief washed over Zelda's face so visibly that she swayed slightly, and Ethan stepped forward instinctively to steady her with a hand on her elbow. She flinched at the contact, then seemed to force herself to relax, reminding herself that this was Ethan, Thomas's best friend, the man her husband had trusted above all others. "I can work," she said quickly as they walked toward the ranch house, a sturdy adobe structure that Thomas and Ethan had built together 5 years ago when they had pooled their money and bought this land. "I can cook, clean, mend clothes, tend a garden. I don't expect charity." "I know you can work," Ethan said, thinking of the stories Thomas had told about how Zelda had helped her father run his general store back in Missouri, before the fever took both her parents within a week of each other. "But you are not a hired hand. You are family." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Family. It was what the three of them had been building before everything fell apart. Thomas and Zelda in the little house, they had started to build on the eastern edge of the ranch property, and Ethan in the main house, partners in every sense of the word, building something that would last. The ranch house was cooler inside, the thick adobe walls keeping out the worst of the heat. Ethan watched as Zelda looked around the main room, taking in the simple furniture, the stone fireplace, the cooking area in the corner. He saw her gaze linger on the photograph that sat on the mantel, the one of the three of them taken in town 6 months ago, all of them smiling, unaware of what was coming. "When did you arrive in Globe?" Ethan asked, setting her suitcase down near the door. "This morning on the stage," Zelda said. "I walked from town." "That is 5 miles in this heat," Ethan said, concern sharpening his voice. "You should have sent word. I would have come for you." I wasn't sure you would want me here, Zelda admitted, sinking into one of the wooden chairs at the table. After Thomas died, his brother came. He said the house we were building belonged to the ranch, which meant it belonged to you. He took what little money Thomas had saved and said I had no claim to anything. He told me to go back to Missouri, but there is nothing for me there. Everyone I knew is gone. Anger flared hot in Ethan's chest. He had met Thomas's brother once, a cold man who had never approved of Thomas becoming a rancher, who had wanted him to join the family banking business back east. Harold had no right to take anything. Thomas's half of this ranch, his savings, everything, that all belongs to you now. Zelda looked up at him with surprise. But you were partners. Surely it all goes to you. We had papers drawn up, Ethan said, moving to the small desk in the corner where they kept important documents in a locked box. He retrieved the key from his pocket and opened it, pulling out the partnership agreement they had signed when they bought the ranch. It says right here that if anything happens to either of us, our share goes to our next of kin. For Thomas, that is you. You are his wife. He handed her the papers and watched as she read through them, her eyes widening as she realized what this meant. She owned half of a thriving cattle ranch with good water, fertile grazing land, and a small but quality herd. She was not destitute. She had a future. I had no idea, she whispered. Harold said there was nothing. He said Thomas died with debts. Thomas died a prosperous man, Ethan said firmly. And Harold is a liar who saw a chance to take advantage of a grieving widow. If he took money from you, it was theft, plain and simple. Zelda folded the papers carefully and set them on the table. I don't even know how much he took. Maybe $200. Thomas kept it in a tin in our room. We will get it back, Ethan promised, though he had no idea how they would track down Harold, who had left town the day after the funeral and never looked back. It doesn't matter, Zelda said tiredly. What matters is that I have a place to be. Thank you, Ethan. I know this cannot be easy for you either. Thomas told me how close you two were, like brothers. Closer than brothers in some ways, Ethan thought. They had fought together, bled together, built dreams together. Losing Thomas had torn a hole in his life that he didn't know how to fill. And now here was Zelda, Thomas's widow, his responsibility and his connection to the man he had lost. Are you hungry? He asked, needing to do something practical, something that would keep his mind from spiraling into grief again. Starving, Zelda admitted. I haven't eaten since yesterday morning. Ethan moved to the cooking area and began preparing a simple meal of beans, bacon, and cornbread. It was rough fare, bachelor food, and he felt suddenly self-conscious about his lack of domestic skills. Zelda watched him work for a few minutes, then stood and joined him. Let me, she said gently. You must have work to finish before dark. He wanted to protest, to tell her she was a guest, but the truth was he did have work to finish, and she clearly needed something to occupy her hands. All right, he said, stepping back. But tomorrow we figure out a real arrangement. You are a partner in this ranch now, not a housekeeper. She smiled at him, the first real smile he had seen from her since she arrived, and it transformed her face, reminding him of the vibrant young woman Thomas had fallen in love with. Partners then, she agreed. Ethan went back outside to finish mending the fence, but his mind was not on the work. Instead, he kept thinking about Zelda in his house, cooking at his stove, inhabiting the space that had been exclusively his domain for 3 months. It felt strange and right at the same time, like a piece of the world clicking back into place even as another piece remained forever broken. When he returned to the house as the sun was setting, painting the Arizona sky in shades of orange and purple, the smell of proper cooking greeted him. Zelda had done more than just warm up beans. She had made a stew with vegetables from the root cellar, fresh cornbread that was actually light and fluffy, and even a pot of coffee that smelled rich and strong. "You have been busy," he said, washing his hands in the basin by the door. "It felt good to cook again," Zelda said, ladling stew into bowls. "I have been staying with Thomas's cousin in Tucson for the past 2 months, and she made it very clear I was an imposition. I wasn't allowed to touch anything in her kitchen." They sat down to eat, and for a few minutes there was only the sound of spoons against bowls. Ethan couldn't remember the last time he had eaten a meal this good, and he told her so. "Thomas always said you survived on jerky and coffee," Zelda said, and there was a lightness in her voice that hadn't been there before. "He was not wrong," Ethan admitted. "Cooking was his job when we were on the trail. I was in charge of not getting us lost." "He told me stories about your trail days," Zelda said. "Driving cattle from Texas to the railheads in Kansas, sleeping under the stars, dodging storms and rustlers." "Those were hard times but good ones," Ethan said. "We were young and thought we could conquer the world." "It was during one of those drives that we decided to save up and buy our own place. Took us 3 years of eating dust and saving every penny, but we did it." "He loved this ranch," Zelda said softly. "He loved building something permanent, something that would last." "He loved you more," Ethan said, meeting her eyes across the table. "He talked about you constantly, drove me half crazy with it sometimes, but I could see how happy you made him." Tears welled up in Zelda's eyes, but she blinked them back. "I loved him too. When he died, I thought my life was over. I didn't know how to go on without him." "But you are here," Ethan pointed out. "You kept going." "Because there was no other choice," Zelda said. "And because somewhere in my grief, I remembered Thomas telling me that if anything ever happened to him, I should come to you. He said you were the best man he knew, that you would take care of me." The weight of that trust settled on Ethan's shoulders, heavy but not unwelcome. "I will do my best to honor that," he promised. After dinner, Ethan showed Zelda to the spare bedroom, a small room off the main living area that had been intended as storage but had a bed and a window that caught the evening breeze. It wasn't much, but it was clean and private. "Tomorrow we can talk about what you want to do," Ethan said. "The house Thomas was building for you too, it is about half finished. We could complete it if you want your own space, or we can make other arrangements." Zelda looked around the small room, then back at Ethan. "Can I think about it?" "Of course," he said. "Take all the time you need. Good night, Zelda." "Good night, Ethan." He left her there and returned to his own room on the other side of the house, but sleep did not come easily. He kept thinking about Thomas, about the promise he had made, about the woman sleeping under his roof who was now his partner and his responsibility. He had never expected his life to take this turn, and he had no idea how to navigate it. The next few days fell into an uneasy rhythm. Ethan rose before dawn to tend to the cattle and horses, mend fences, check water sources, and handle the 100 other tasks that kept a ranch running. Zelda threw herself into making the house a home, cleaning years of bachelor neglect from every corner, organizing the kitchen, planting a vegetable garden near the house, and cooking meals that made Ethan realize just how poorly he had been eating. They were polite with each other, careful, dancing around the grief that connected them. But slowly, as the days turned into weeks, they began to relax into each other's presence. Ethan started staying for a second cup of coffee in the mornings, listening as Zelda talked about her plans for the garden or her ideas for improving the house. Zelda started asking questions about the ranch, genuinely interested in learning about the cattle business that Thomas had loved. One evening in late July, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Zelda brought up the unfinished house again. "I have been thinking about what to do with it," she said, and, Ethan prompted, "I think we should finish it, Zelda said, "but not for me to live in. I was thinking it could be a place for ranch hands, or maybe we could rent it out or use it for storage. I don't want it to just sit there half-finished, a monument to what Thomas and I were supposed to have." Ethan understood. The unfinished house was a painful reminder of dreams cut short. "That makes sense," he said. "We could finish it this fall after the cattle drive. Use it to house the extra men we hire on during busy seasons. I also want to be more involved in the ranch," Zelda continued. "Thomas left me half of this business and I want to actually be a partner, not just someone who lives here. I can learn to keep the books, manage the household accounts, even help with the horses. I am a quick learner." Ethan looked at her with new respect. Most women in her position would have been content to live off the ranch's profits without involving themselves in the actual work. "I think Thomas would like that," he said. "He always said you had a head for business from your time in your father's store." "I do," Zelda said with confidence. "And I want to contribute, to make this ranch even more successful than it already is. It is what Thomas would have wanted." Over the following weeks, Ethan began teaching Zelda the ins and outs of ranch management. He showed her the account books, explaining how they tracked expenses and profits, how they planned for lean years and made the most of good ones. She learned quickly, her mind sharp and her questions insightful. She also began working with the horses, starting with the gentler mares and gradually building her confidence and skill. Ethan found himself looking forward to their evening conversations on the porch. The way Zelda challenged his thinking and brought new perspectives to problems he had been wrestling with alone. She was smart and funny, with a dry wit that caught him off guard and made him laugh in a way he hadn't since Thomas died. And she was beautiful, though he tried not to notice that, tried not to feel guilty for the way his heart sometimes quickened when she smiled at him. It was late August when the attraction between them first became undeniable. They had ridden out together to check on the herd in the northern pasture, a trip that took most of the day. On the way back, Zelda's horse stumbled in a prairie dog hole, throwing her from the saddle. Ethan was off his own horse in an instant, rushing to her side as she lay in the dust, dazed but conscious. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands running over her arms and legs, checking for breaks. "I don't think so," Zelda said breathlessly. "Just startled." She looked up at him, and suddenly he was very aware of how close they were, of his hands on her body, of the way her eyes had darkened as she looked at him. He pulled back quickly, helping her to her feet with more brusqueness than necessary. "We should get you home," he said, not meeting her eyes. The ride back was silent and tense, both of them lost in thoughts they could not voice. When they reached the ranch, Ethan helped Zelda down from her horse and then made an excuse about needing to check the south fence line, disappearing before she could say anything. He stayed out until well after dark, wrestling with the guilt and confusion that churned in his gut. He had no right to feel this way about Zelda. She was Thomas's wife, his widow, and it had only been 4 months since his partner's death. What kind of man developed feelings for his dead best friend's wife? But when he finally returned to the house, Zelda was waiting for him on the porch, 2 cups of coffee growing cold on the table beside her. "We need to talk about this," she said quietly as he approached. "There is nothing to talk about," Ethan said, but even he could hear the lie in his voice. "Ethan, please," Zelda said. "Sit down." He sat, though every instinct told him to run. Zelda took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I love Thomas," she began. "I loved him with all my heart, and his death broke something in me that I don't know will ever fully heal. But he is gone, and I am still here, and so are you. And these past few weeks, I've felt something I didn't expect to feel again, something I feel guilty about but cannot seem to stop. Ethan's heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "Zelda, don't. I have to," she insisted. "Because I see the way you look at me sometimes when you think I am not paying attention. I see the way you pull away when we get too close. And I need to know if I am imagining this, if I am so desperate for connection that I am seeing things that are not there." "You are not imagining it," Ethan admitted, the words dragged from somewhere deep inside him. "But that doesn't mean we should act on it. Thomas was my best friend. He trusted me to take care of you, not to what?" Zelda challenged. "Not to care about me, not to let me care about you." "Ethan, Thomas is gone. We both wish he wasn't, but wishes don't change reality. We are both alive and we are allowed to keep living." "It has only been 4 months," Ethan said desperately. "People would talk. They would say terrible things about you, about us." "Let them talk," Zelda said fiercely. "I have learned that life is too short and too precious to waste worrying about what other people think. I almost died of grief after Thomas passed. Coming here, being with you, it has given me a reason to keep going. I won't apologize for that." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the strength and determination in her eyes, the way she had transformed from a broken woman with a suitcase into a vibrant, vital person who was fighting for what she wanted. And what she wanted, impossibly, was him. "I don't know how to do this," he confessed. "I don't know how to honor Thomas's memory and move forward at the same time." "We do it together," Zelda said, reaching across the space between them to take his hand. "We do it honestly and carefully, and we don't forget him. He will always be a part of both of us, but we also let ourselves be happy. I think Thomas would want that for us." Ethan thought about his friend, about the kind of man Thomas had been. Generous, loving, always wanting the best for the people he cared about. Would he want Zelda to spend the rest of her life alone, mourning? Would he want Ethan to do the same? Or would he want them to find comfort and joy with each other? He would want that, Ethan agreed quietly. "But we take this slow. We don't rush into anything. We give ourselves time to be sure." "Slow," Zelda agreed, squeezing his hand. "I can do slow." They sat there on the porch for a long time, hands clasped, watching the stars emerge in the vast Arizona sky. It was not a declaration of love, not yet, but it was an acknowledgement of something real and growing between them, something that frightened and excited them both. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of growing closer while respecting the grief that still haunted them both. Ethan and Zelda worked side by side during the days, building their partnership in the ranch and slowly, carefully, building something more personal. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, sharing stories of their pasts, their dreams for the future, their memories of Thomas. In early September, Ethan hired 3 men to help drive the cattle to the railhead in New Mexico. It was a 2-week journey there and back, and he worried about leaving Zelda alone at the ranch for so long. "I will be fine," she assured him. "I know how to shoot, and the nearest neighbor is only 3 miles away if I need help. Besides, I have plenty to keep me busy. I want to finish organizing the account books and start planning for next year's breeding season." "You could come with us," Ethan suggested, though he knew it was not practical. Cattle drives were rough, dangerous work, no place for a woman according to conventional wisdom, though he had known a few women tough enough to handle it. "And leave the ranch unattended," Zelda shook her head. "No, this is my responsibility too now. I will hold down the fort while you are gone." The morning he left, Ethan found himself reluctant to ride away. He and Zelda stood by the gate, the same gate where she had appeared with her suitcase just 2 months before, and the world felt different now, fuller. "Be safe," Zelda said, adjusting the collar of his shirt in a gesture that felt both natural and intimate. "Always am," Ethan said, trying for his usual confidence but hearing the uncertainty in his voice. "Come back to me," Zelda said, and there was weight in those words, a meaning that went beyond simple concern for a business partner. "I will," Ethan promised, and then, before he could second-guess himself, he leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "I will come back." He rode away without looking back, afraid that if he did he would not be able to leave at all. The drive went smoothly, the cattle cooperative, the weather holding fair. They made good time to the railhead and got an excellent price for the herd. But through it all, Ethan's thoughts kept drifting back to Globe, to the ranch, to Zelda. The other men noticed his distraction. "Got yourself a woman back home?" asked Pete, one of the older hands who had worked cattle drives for 20 years. "Something like that," Ethan admitted. "Well, that explains the mooning about," Pete said with a grin. "Never seen you so eager to get a drive over with. Usually you take your time, enjoy the trail." "Things change," Ethan said simply. "That they do," Pete agreed. "That they do." When they finally rode back through the ranch gate, 14 days after leaving, Ethan's heart lifted at the sight of Zelda standing on the porch, shielding her eyes against the afternoon sun, watching for them. He dismounted quickly, giving instructions to the other men to take care of the horses while he strode toward the house. "You made good time," Zelda said, and there was joy in her voice, in her smile, in the way she moved toward him without hesitation. "We had good weather and a cooperative herd," Ethan said, stopping just in front of her, drinking in the sight of her. "How was everything here?" "Quiet," Zelda said. "Lonely. I missed having someone to talk to." "Just someone?" Ethan asked, emboldened by the way she was looking at him. "I missed you," Zelda clarified, her voice soft. "Specifically you." They stood there on the porch, the hired hands bustling around in the background, putting away tack and tending horses, but they might as well have been alone in the world for all the attention they paid to anything else. "I missed you too," Ethan admitted. "Every day, every mile, I wanted to turn around and come back. But you didn't," Zelda observed. "I had a responsibility to see the job through," Ethan said, "and I knew you were here waiting, and that was enough." Something shifted in Zelda's expression, a decision made. "Ethan, I don't want to go slow anymore. I have been thinking about this for 2 weeks, and I am sure. Life is too uncertain, too fragile. I don't want to waste time being cautious when I know what I feel." "What do you feel?" Ethan asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I love you," Zelda said simply. "I know it has only been a few months. I know it probably seems too soon. But I have already learned that love doesn't wait for convenient timing. It happens when it happens, and what I feel for you is real and true and worth fighting for." Ethan's breath caught in his chest. He had hoped, had dreamed, but hearing the words spoken aloud made them real in a way that terrified and thrilled him. "I love you too," he said, the words feeling both strange and right on his tongue. "I have been trying not to, trying to tell myself it was too soon, too complicated, too disrespectful to Thomas's memory. But I cannot help how I feel, and what I feel is love." Zelda stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "Then show me," she whispered. Ethan cupped her face in his hands, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin, and kissed her. It was not the chaste kiss he had given her forehead before he left. This was deeper, filled with all the longing and love and need that had been building between them for months. Zelda kissed him back with equal passion, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "We should probably not do this on the porch where all the hands can see us," he murmured. Zelda laughed, a sound of pure joy that made Ethan's heart soar. "Probably not," she agreed. "Though I imagine they have already figured out that we are more than business partners." "Let them figure," Ethan said, stealing another quick kiss. I don't care what anyone thinks anymore. You are right. Life is too short. That evening, after the hired hands had been paid and sent on their way, Ethan and Zelda sat down to discuss their future in practical terms. They were sitting close together on the porch, Ethan's arm around Zelda's shoulders, her head resting against his chest. People in town are going to talk, Ethan said. Thomas has only been gone 5 months. Some will say this is disrespectful, that we are dishonoring his memory. Then they don't understand what kind of man Thomas was, Zelda said firmly. He would never want us to be miserable out of some sense of obligation to his memory. He loved us both. He would want us to be happy. You are right, Ethan agreed, but we should still be smart about this. Give it a little more time before we make any public announcements. Maybe wait until the spring to get married. Married, Zelda repeated, and Ethan could hear the smile in her voice. You do want to marry me, don't you? Ethan asked, suddenly uncertain. I am sorry, I should have asked properly, should have gotten down on one knee, and Zelda turned in his arms and silenced him with a kiss. Yes, I want to marry you. I don't need a fancy proposal. I just need you. They agreed to keep their relationship quiet for a few more months, to let more time pass after Thomas's death before making their plans public. But privately, in the safety of the ranch, they allowed themselves to explore this new dimension of their relationship. They held hands, they kissed, they talked about the future they would build together. As autumn turned to winter, they settled into a comfortable domesticity that felt both new and familiar. Ethan taught Zelda more about ranching, and she proved to be a natural, with instincts for the work that impressed him. They finished the little house that Thomas had started, turning it into a comfortable bunkhouse for seasonal workers. Working on it together was bittersweet, but also healing, a way of honoring what Thomas had started while making it part of their shared future. In December, they took a trip to Tucson to do some trading and pick up supplies for the winter. While they were there, Ethan bought Zelda a ring, a simple gold band with a small emerald that matched her eyes. He presented it to her in their hotel room, getting down on one knee properly this time. Zelda Dawson, will you marry me? He asked, holding up the ring. Will you be my wife, my partner, the woman I spend the rest of my life loving? Yes, Zelda said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Ethan slipped the ring on her finger and stood, gathering her into his arms. When Thomas first introduced us, I never imagined this is where we would end up, he said. But I cannot imagine being anywhere else with anyone else. Me neither, Zelda whispered against his chest. Me neither. They decided to wait until May to get married, a full year after Zelda had shown up at the ranch gate with her suitcase. It would give the town time to adjust to the idea of them as a couple and would feel less like they were rushing into things out of grief. The winter months passed peacefully. They had snow in January, a rare occurrence in Globe that turned the desert landscape into something magical. Ethan and Zelda stood on the porch wrapped in blankets, watching the snow fall, marveling at the quiet beauty of it. I have been thinking about Thomas a lot lately, Zelda said quietly. Not with sadness, but with gratitude. If I hadn't married him, if he hadn't brought me here, I never would have met you. In a strange way, losing him led me to you. I think about that too, Ethan admitted, and I think Thomas somehow knew. He made me promise to take care of you, but I think he also knew that taking care of you would end up healing me too. We both lost him, but we found each other. Do you think he would approve? Zelda asked. Really? Ethan thought about his friend, about the generous spirit that had defined Thomas's life. I think he would be happy for us. I think he would tell me I was a lucky man and tell you that you could do better, and then he would toast our happiness and mean every word. Zelda laughed through tears. You are right. That is exactly what he would do. As spring approached, they began making actual plans for the wedding. They decided to keep it simple, just a ceremony in the church in Globe with a few close friends and neighbors. Zelda made her own dress, a simple but elegant cream-colored gown that made her look radiant. Ethan bought a new suit and got his hair trimmed. The week before the wedding, Harold showed up at the ranch. Ethan was working in the barn when one of the horses nickered nervously. He looked up to see a well-dressed man standing in the doorway, backlit by the afternoon sun. It took him a moment to recognize Thomas's brother, and when he did, anger surged hot in his veins. "You have a lot of nerve showing your face here," Ethan said coldly. "I heard a disturbing rumor in town," Harold said, his voice dripping with disdain. "They say you are planning to marry my brother's widow. Tell me it isn't true." "It is true," Ethan said, setting down the brush he had been using on the horse and facing Harold squarely. "Zelda and I are getting married in 4 days." "It is indecent," Harold spat. "My brother has been dead less than a year and you have already moved in on his wife. You are nothing but an opportunistic scavenger, taking advantage of a grieving woman." "Watch your mouth," Ethan warned, his hands clenching into fists. "You know nothing about Zelda and me, about what we have been through or how we feel about each other." "I know you have disgraced my brother's memory," Harold said, "and I intend to contest his will. That ranch belongs to me as his only living blood relative, not to some opportunistic widow who couldn't even wait a decent interval before moving on to his partner. You try to contest that will and I will drag you through every court in the territory," Ethan said dangerously. Thomas made his wishes clear. "Everything he had goes to Zelda, and while we are on the subject, you owe her $200 that you stole from her when Thomas died." "I stole nothing," Harold said, but his eyes shifted guiltily. "That money was payment for the expenses I incurred settling Thomas's affairs." "What affairs?" Ethan demanded. "Thomas died here, was buried here, and you left town the day after the funeral. You didn't settle anything except your own pockets, so here is what is going to happen. You are going to leave this ranch right now and never come back. If you try to contest the will or make trouble for Zelda, I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of thief you are. And if you ever come near my wife again, I will forget I am a civilized man. Do we understand each other?" Harold's face flushed red with anger, but he could see the cold determination in Ethan's eyes and knew he was beaten. "This isn't over," he blustered, but he was already backing toward his horse. "Yeah, it is," Ethan said flatly. "Goodbye, Harold, don't come back." He watched until Harold rode away, then went to find Zelda. She was in the garden, tending to the early spring vegetables, and she looked up with a smile when she saw him approaching. "Harold was here," Ethan said without preamble. The smile faded from Zelda's face. "What did he want?" "To make trouble," Ethan said. "He threatened to contest Thomas's will and said some unpleasant things about us getting married. I sent him on his way, but I wanted you to know." Zelda stood, brushing dirt from her hands. "Do you think he will actually try to contest the will?" "No," Ethan said. "He is a bully and a coward. He was testing to see if he could intimidate us, but he knows he has no legal standing. The will is ironclad. But if he does try something, we have lawyers who will fight it." "I am not afraid of Harold," Zelda said firmly. "And I am not going to let him ruin our wedding. We have every right to be happy to build a life together. Thomas would want that." "I know," Ethan said, pulling her into his arms. "I just hate that people are trying to make something ugly out of what we have." "Let them try," Zelda said fiercely. "They cannot touch what we feel for each other. 4 more days and I will be your wife, and nothing and no one is going to stop that." The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the Arizona sky a brilliant blue dome overhead. Zelda dressed in the little bedroom that had been hers for almost a year, her hands steady as she buttoned her dress and arranged her hair. She looked at herself in the small mirror, seeing a woman who had been broken and rebuilt, who had lost everything and found something precious in the ashes. There was a soft knock on the door, and when she opened it, Ethan stood there in his new suit, looking handsome and nervous. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You look pretty good yourself," Zelda said with a smile. "Are you ready for this?" "I have been ready since the day you showed up at my gate with that suitcase," Ethan said. "I just didn't know it yet." They rode into town together in the wagon, side by side, and if anyone found it improper that they arrived together, they kept it to themselves. The church was full of people, more than Ethan had expected. Neighbors from nearby ranches, shopkeepers from town, people who had known Thomas and wanted to witness this new chapter. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. The preacher spoke about love and loss, about healing and new beginnings. When it came time for the vows, Ethan and Zelda spoke them clearly and firmly, their eyes locked on each other, the rest of the world fading away. "I, Ethan Foster, take you, Zelda Dawson, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. I, Zelda Dawson, take you, Ethan Foster, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for all the days of my life." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and told Ethan he could kiss his bride, the kiss they shared was sweet and full of promise. The small congregation applauded, and Zelda could see genuine happiness in most of the faces looking at them, acceptance and support. At the reception, held in the church hall, neighbors brought food and well wishes. Several people who had known Thomas came up to offer their blessings, saying that Thomas would have wanted them to be happy. It was healing to have their love accepted and celebrated by the community. As the evening wore on and they prepared to head back to the ranch, old Pete, who had worked the cattle drive with Ethan, pulled him aside. "That is a good woman you have got there," he said. "Hold on to her tight." "I intend to," Ethan said. "And don't waste time feeling guilty about finding happiness," Pete added. "Life is too short and too hard to turn away from joy when it is offered. Your friend, he would understand that." "Thank you," Ethan said, shaking the older man's hand. "That means a lot." They rode back to the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the landscape in shades of gold and amber. When they reached the gate, Ethan stopped the wagon and turned to Zelda. "This is where it all started," he said. "You standing at this gate with that suitcase, looking lost and desperate and brave all at once." "I was terrified," Zelda admitted. "I had no idea if you would even let me stay, if you would honor what Thomas wanted." "And now?" Ethan asked. "Now I am home," Zelda said simply. "With the man I love, building the life I want. I am not terrified anymore." Ethan kissed her there at the gate, sealing the promise of their new beginning before driving them home to start their married life. The summer of 1884 was one of the happiest of Ethan's life. He and Zelda worked the ranch together as true partners, their different strengths complementing each other perfectly. She managed the household accounts with precision and skill, negotiated with buyers who came to look at their cattle, and proved to have an eye for breeding stock that resulted in some of the best calves they had ever produced. He handled the physical labor of the ranch, the fence mending and cattle work, but increasingly relied on her judgment for business decisions. At night, they would sit on the porch and talk about their dreams for the future. They wanted to expand the herd, maybe buy the adjacent property when old Mr. Henderson finally decided to sell. They talked about children, both excited and nervous about the prospect of becoming parents. In August, Zelda discovered she was pregnant. She told Ethan over breakfast one morning, watching nervously for his reaction. "Are you sure?" he asked, setting down his coffee cup with a hand that shook slightly. "As sure as I can be," Zelda said. "The baby should come in late winter or early spring." Ethan came around the table and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "I am going to be a father," he said, wonder in his voice. "Are you happy?" Zelda asked. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Ethan said, kissing her soundly. "I am terrified and thrilled and more in love with you than I thought possible." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall and into winter. Zelda remained active on the ranch as long as she could, only reluctantly accepting Ethan's insistence that she slow down as her belly grew large and her movements more awkward. He fussed over her constantly, making sure she ate enough, rested enough, didn't overdo it. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she protested one day when he tried to stop her from lifting a basket of laundry. "I know," Ethan said, "but you are carrying the most precious thing in the world, and I am not taking any chances." Their son was born on a cold March morning in 1885, arriving quickly and easily, much to everyone's relief. Ethan held the tiny baby in his hands, awed by the perfection of him, the small fingers that gripped his thumb with surprising strength, the eyes that blinked up at him with unfocused wonder. "He needs a name," Zelda said from the bed, tired but radiant with joy. They had discussed names for months, unable to settle on anything that felt right. But now, looking at his son, Ethan knew. "Thomas," he said quietly. "I want to name him Thomas after the friend who brought us together." "If that is all right with you." Tears filled Zelda's eyes. "It is more than all right," she said. "It is perfect. Thomas Ethan Foster." Holding his son, watching his wife smile up at him with love and exhaustion, Ethan felt a sense of completion he had never expected to feel. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, about loss and grief, and the courage to love again. He thought about the day Zelda had shown up at his gate with a suitcase, how he had been sure in that moment that taking her in was what Thomas would have wanted, never imagining that it would lead to this. "Thank you," he whispered to the memory of his friend, "for everything." The years that followed were rich and full. Little Thomas grew into a sturdy, energetic boy who loved the ranch and followed his father everywhere, learning to ride almost before he could walk properly. 2 years after Thomas was born, Zelda gave birth to twin daughters they named Emma and Alice, who brought chaos and joy in equal measure to the household. The ranch prospered under their joint management. They bought the Henderson property when the old man finally retired, and moved to live with his daughter in California, doubling their grazing land. They built a new, larger house to accommodate their growing family, though they kept the original adobe structure and used it as an office and guest quarters. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Ethan and Zelda rode out to the spot where her horse had stumbled all those years ago, the place where they had first acknowledged the attraction between them. They dismounted and stood looking out over the land they had built together. "You ever regret it?" Ethan asked. "Marrying me so soon after Thomas died, the scandal it caused?" "Never," Zelda said firmly. "Not once. You gave me a life I never expected to have, a happiness I thought I had lost forever. I loved Thomas, and I will always treasure the time we had together. But you are my present and my future, and I wouldn't change a single thing about how we got here." "I love you," Ethan said, pulling her close, "more with each passing year." "And I love you," Zelda replied, "always." As they rode back to the ranch, they could see their children playing in the yard, Thomas chasing his little sisters while they shrieked with laughter. It was a scene of domestic happiness that both of them had fought hard to achieve, that they never took for granted. That evening, after the children were in bed, Ethan and Zelda sat on the porch of their new house, watching the stars emerge in the vast Arizona sky. It was a ritual they had maintained through all the years, this quiet time together to talk and dream and simply be. "I have been thinking," Zelda said, "about everything that happened to bring us here, about Thomas dying, about me coming here with nothing but a suitcase and hope." "What about it?" Ethan asked. "I think we were meant to find each other," Zelda said. "I don't mean to diminish what I had with Thomas or to suggest his death was somehow fated. But I think in the midst of tragedy, we were given a chance at something beautiful, and we were brave enough to take it." "You were brave enough," Ethan corrected. "I was just a man trying to keep a promise to his friend. You were the one who had the courage to come here, to stay, to let yourself love again." "We both had to be brave," Zelda insisted. "You had to be brave enough to let me in, to let yourself care for me despite the guilt and the gossip." "That takes courage too." "Well, we make a good pair then," Ethan said with a smile. "Two brave people building something worth having." 10 years after Zelda had first appeared at the gate with her suitcase, the ranch had become one of the most successful in the territory. They employed a dozen hands full-time, had over 1,000 head of cattle, and were known throughout Arizona for the quality of their stock. Thomas was 12 years old, already helping with real ranch work and showing his father's talent for the business. The twins were 10, bright and curious and full of mischief. Zelda had also gotten actively involved in the community, helping establish a school in Globe and advocating for better resources for ranch families spread across the territory. She had become a respected voice in the region, known for her sharp mind and her compassion. One day in late summer, a young woman appeared at the ranch gate. She looked exhausted and desperate, carrying a small bag and leading a limping horse. Ethan saw her from the barn and walked out to meet her, Zelda joining him from the house. "Can we help you?" Ethan asked. "I am looking for work," the young woman said. "I can cook, clean, help with animals. I don't need much, just a place to stay and enough to get by." Ethan and Zelda exchanged a look, both of them remembering another desperate woman who had shown up at their gate years before. "What is your name?" Zelda asked gently. "Sarah," the young woman said. "Sarah Mitchell. My husband died 3 months ago in a mining accident in Tombstone. I have been trying to make it on my own, but it is hard." "I understand," Zelda said softly. "Come on inside. Let's get you some food and water and we can talk about what you need." As they walked toward the house, Ethan took the reins of Sarah's horse to lead it to the barn. Zelda walked beside the young widow, her hand gentle on the woman's shoulder. "You are going to be all right," Zelda promised. "I know it doesn't feel like it now, but you are going to survive this and build a new life. I know because I did it." That evening, after they had gotten Sarah settled in the bunkhouse and given her a proper meal, Ethan and Zelda sat on their porch and talked about what to do. "We should hire her," Zelda said. "Not out of charity, but because she genuinely can help. With the children getting older and the ranch growing, I could use assistance with the household, and you could use another hand to help with the horses." "Are you sure?" Ethan asked. "It will bring back memories, having someone in her situation here." "Good memories," Zelda said firmly. "And maybe we can help her the way you helped me. Not everyone gets that chance, to be given hope when they have lost everything. If we can provide that for her, we should." Sarah Mitchell stayed on at the ranch and proved to be a hard worker and a kind soul. Over time, she became part of their extended family, a trusted friend and valued employee. She eventually married one of the ranch hands, a quiet man named John who treated her with the gentleness and respect she deserved. And they built a small house on the ranch property where they raised 3 children of their own. The years continued to unfold in a pattern of work and joy, challenge and triumph. There were hard times, droughts that tested their resilience, storms that damaged property, market fluctuations that required careful management. But Ethan and Zelda faced everything together, their partnership strong, their love unwavering. When Thomas Jr. was 18, he took over more of the day-to-day operations of the ranch, showing the same natural talent for ranching that his father and namesake had possessed. Emma proved to have her mother's head for business and took over managing the accounts and negotiations. Alice surprised everyone by becoming a skilled veterinarian, one of the few women in the territory to pursue that profession, and she worked with ranchers all over Arizona treating their animals. Ethan and Zelda, now in their early 40s, found themselves with more time to simply enjoy life. They took trips to visit Emma when she married and moved to Prescott with her husband, a lawyer with political ambitions. They welcomed Alice's choice to remain unmarried and dedicated to her work, supporting her unconventional path. And they took pride in watching Thomas build his own family on the ranch, marrying a sweet-natured woman named Rebecca who fit into their family as if she had always been there. On a warm evening in the spring of 1899, Ethan and Zelda sat on the porch of the house they had built together, now expanded and improved over the years, but still fundamentally the home they had created. They were watching the sunset, as they had done countless times before. "Do you remember the day I showed up at your gate?" Zelda asked. "It was 16 years ago this month." "I remember," Ethan said. "You looked so determined and so scared at the same time. I knew right then that my life was about to change, though I had no idea how much. If someone had told me that day that I would end up here, married to you with 3 grown children and a ranch that spans thousands of acres, I never would have believed them," Zelda said. "I thought my life was over when Thomas died." "Instead it was just beginning," Ethan said, "for both of us." "Do you ever wonder what Thomas would think of all this?" Zelda asked. "Of us, of what we built. I think he would be proud," Ethan said. "Proud of you for your strength, proud of the children, proud of what we have accomplished. And I think he would be happy that we found love again, that we didn't let grief destroy us." "I hope so," Zelda said. "I like to think he had a hand in bringing us together, that he knew we would need each other." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands, watching the sky turn from orange to purple to deep blue. Around them, the ranch they had built together hummed with life. In the barn, horses nickered and settled for the night. In the bunkhouse, ranch hands played cards and told stories. In the small house beyond the garden, Thomas Jr. was putting his own children to bed, the next generation of Fosters who would carry on the legacy. "We have had a good life," Ethan said eventually. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "The best life," Zelda agreed. "And it all started with you saying he would want you here when I showed up at your gate with nothing but a suitcase and desperation." "You had more than that," Ethan corrected. "You had courage and strength and hope. You just needed someone to help you see it." "And you had grief and loneliness and a promise to keep," Zelda said. "You needed someone to help you live again." "We saved each other," Ethan said simply. "We loved each other," Zelda corrected. "That is what saved us both." As the stars began to emerge in the vast Arizona sky, Ethan pulled Zelda closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder. They had weathered loss and found love, had built something enduring from the ashes of tragedy. Their love story had started in grief, but had blossomed into something beautiful and lasting, a testament to the healing power of love and the courage to embrace new beginnings. Years later, when their grandchildren would ask about how they fell in love, Zelda and Ethan would tell them the whole story. About Thomas, the friend and husband whose death brought them together. About the day Zelda appeared at the gate with her suitcase, desperate and grieving. about Ethan's decision to honor his friend's memory by taking her in, about how grief slowly transformed into friendship, friendship into attraction, and attraction into deep, abiding love. They would tell their grandchildren that sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the most painful circumstances, that love can bloom even in the midst of loss, and that having the courage to open your heart again after tragedy is one of the bravest things a person can do. And they would tell them that while life is uncertain and often painful, it is also full of second chances, unexpected blessings, and the possibility of finding love in the most unlikely places, even at a dusty ranch gate in Globe, Arizona, where a grieving widow with a suitcase met a lonely cowboy who said the 5 words that changed both their lives forever. He would want you here. The ranch would remain in the Foster family for generations, passed down from Thomas Jr. to his children and their children after them. And always, the story of how Ethan and Zelda found love would be told and retold, a reminder that even in the hardest times there is hope, and that love, when it comes, is worth every risk, every moment of doubt, every whisper of scandal. On their 50th wedding anniversary in 1934, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, Ethan and Zelda renewed their vows in the same church where they had first married. Ethan was 76 years old, Zelda was 74, and their love had only deepened with time. I, Ethan Foster, still take you, Zelda Foster, to be my wife, Ethan said, his voice strong despite his age. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for whatever days we have left. I, Zelda Foster, still take you, Ethan Foster, to be my husband, Zelda replied, her eyes bright with tears. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for all my remaining days. When they kissed, their family erupted in applause and cheers. It was a celebration not just of their marriage, but of everything they had built together, every challenge they had overcome, every joy they had shared. That night, lying in bed in the house they had shared for so many years, Zelda turned to Ethan and smiled. We did it, she said. We built a life worth living. We did it together, Ethan said, kissing her forehead, just like we have done everything. I love you, Zelda whispered. From that first day at the gate to this moment, I have loved you, and I have loved you, Ethan replied, always and forever. They fell asleep in each other's arms, 2 people who had found love in the aftermath of tragedy, who had built something beautiful and lasting from pain and loss. Their story was one of courage and hope, of second chances and the transformative power of love. When Ethan passed away peacefully in his sleep 5 years later at the age of 81, Zelda was holding his hand. She grieved deeply for the man who had been her partner, her love, her everything for so many years. But she did not break. She had learned long ago that grief and love are 2 sides of the same coin, that you cannot have one without risking the other, and that the love they had shared was worth every moment of pain. Zelda lived another 6 years, remaining active on the ranch until her final days. She was surrounded by family who loved her, living proof of the life she and Ethan had built together. When she passed away quietly one spring morning in 1945, her last words were about Ethan, about how she was ready to see him again, and about the day she had shown up at his gate with a suitcase, scared and alone, and he had said the words that saved her. He would want you here. They were buried side by side in the small cemetery on the ranch property, their graves marked with simple headstones that bore their names and the dates of their births and deaths. Between them, a smaller stone marked the grave of Thomas Dawson, the friend and husband whose death had brought them together, whose memory they had honored in the way they lived and loved. The ranch continued to thrive under the management of their descendants, And the story of Ethan and Zelda's love became a cherished family legend. Every generation learned about the day Zelda appeared at the gate, about Ethan's kindness in taking her in, about how grief transformed into love, and about the courage it takes to open your heart again after loss. Their story became a testament to the idea that endings are not always final, that from loss can come new beginnings, and that love, when it comes, should be embraced fully, regardless of timing or circumstance. It was a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful love stories start in the most unexpected ways, and that having the courage to say yes to love, even when it seems too soon or too complicated, can lead to a lifetime of happiness. The legacy Ethan and Zelda left behind was not just the successful ranch or the large family they created. It was also the example they set of how to love deeply, how to honor the past while embracing the future, and how to build something meaningful from the ruins of tragedy. Their love story, which began with grief and a battered suitcase at a ranch gate in Globe, Arizona, became a beacon of hope for everyone who heard it, proof that second chances are real, that love can heal even the deepest wounds, and that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as the hardest trials. And so the story of the cowboy who took in his dead partner's wife, who honored his friend's memory by giving her a home and eventually his heart, lived on. It was told at family gatherings, whispered to comfort those who grieved, and shared as proof that no matter how dark the night, morning always comes, and with it, the possibility of love, healing, and new beginnings. Their love had been tested by grief, scandal, and the harsh realities of frontier life, but it had endured, growing stronger with each passing year. It was a love built on friendship and respect, on shared dreams and mutual support, on the courage to risk being happy again even when happiness seemed impossible. And it all started with a woman with a suitcase, a man with a promise to keep, and 5 simple words that changed everything. He would want you here.